Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have a lot of exciting sessions about IT, data analytics, and many more. As preparation, make sure you download the vFairs application on your mobile phone, which allows you to join the sessions much easier and by mobile if you wish to do so. And with that, please chill for a few minutes, watch our video for exciting reminders before we begin the session very shortly. Okay. Hello, everyone. Just trying to find my video in Zoom. Welcome to the next level session on how SAP, Microsoft, and Nestlé worked together on one of the biggest migrations to the cloud to date. It is my pleasure to host this session. I'm Laura Vaccotto. I'm the SAP platform manager for the SAP landscape globally. And I'll be hosting the session with two really good colleagues, Christian from Microsoft and Markus from SAP, and we'll introduce them in 2 seconds. Before we go into the presentation as such, let me just walk you through some of the rules of the house. Okay, perfect. So first of all, please have your mobiles on standby to discover career opportunities at Nestlé by scanning the QR codes that you see on the multiple slides of the presentation today. You can also go to slido.com and submit questions for this particular session. So just go there and start preparing your questions. We're gonna have an open discussion at the end of the presentation, and happy to answer whatever questions you have. And no spamming. You know, the chats for these type of events can be filled very quickly with things, and if there's too many messages, we might miss messages from the hosts around you know, instructions or what to do next. So please just keep it to the essential, if that's okay for you. So without further ado, let's get into the presentation. So I'm Laura, as I just said. I've been 20 years with Nestlé, which can be a bit scary, but it's not actually when you look at it. So my career at Nestlé is an example of diversity in the types of roles that one can play. So I've been an expert, a technical expert. I'm now a manager. I went through enterprise architecture, which is a bit of I would say a strategic advisory type of role. I've been one of the locomotives behind the general cloud that we're going to be talking about today. So meaning a career is long. It can be in one company, it can be in many companies. But even if you stay a long time in a company like Nestlé, you would see that there are opportunities to really reinvent yourselves, grow on the way, take up new challenges, and be part of what is a constant IT transformation, supporting a constant business transformation. So that's 2 words about me. I'm now super pleased to introduce my co-hosts today. Christian from Microsoft, over to you.
Yeah, hello. Very happy to be here with you today. So I'm the account lead for Nestlé at Microsoft, meaning I'm leading the team managing all the projects for Nestlé at Microsoft. I've been doing that since 2 years. And I think what's interesting about my background is that I actually started my career with Nestlé and spent 19 years with Nestlé in various marketing and sales positions. And what I'm bringing to Microsoft is the knowledge and the passion of making things happen for Nestlé. I've also spent a few years at Mondelez working on e-commerce, and I spent a year with Google looking after strategic partnerships for shopping. So happy to have a discussion with you on SAP migration today.
Thank you, my pleasure as well. Now tell us a few words about Microsoft, actually, Christian.
Yes, absolutely. So Microsoft is a strategic partner for Nestlé IT team, and we are a strategic partner on 2 very big areas. First of all, the cloud area. So we're hosting all Nestlé data into the cloud and delivering analytics linked to data, delivering artificial intelligence, process automation, and everything that's basically enhancing cloud hosting. Second big pillar that we're partnering with Nestlé is on the employee experience. so on collaboration tools, on Office, on cybersecurity. And we're developing more and more on digital innovation with Nestlé. So we launched very recently a first version of Metaverse universe. We're looking into gaming. We have Nestlé as one of the biggest, largest user globally of low-code, no-code applications where framework is provided by Microsoft. And a few words to Microsoft. Microsoft is one of the largest technology company in the world, founded in 1975, 220,000 employees. I think what's striking about Microsoft is that we're a provider of platforms, and we work with a stunning number of 75,000 partners globally that are developing on Microsoft technologies for Nestlé and for anyone in the world.
Thanks a lot, Christian. I'm really excited to be here with you today. And we now hand over to Markus Miche.
Thanks a lot, Laura, and warm welcome from my side. My name is Markus Miche. I'm with SAP. I'm part of the leadership team within our cloud unit. There is a dedicated team working for Nestlé, and I'm part of that leadership team. I am supporting Nestlé in the meanwhile for more than 6 years, so not necessarily comparable to the background that Laura and Christian summarized before, but still remarkable to my view. In Laura's former role as the lead enterprise architect, when I was a consultant, I was part of that role, so we have a long track record, the two of us. Looking at my SAP journey, I am with SAP in the meanwhile since 2008, so a bit more than 14 years. And during the whole period, I had always a strong focus on digitalization and technology. Talking about SAP, SAP is the #1 cloud business software company and market leader in enterprise application software, covering the entire value chain. So that ranges from early product and technology innovation down to marketing and sales. We do have a digital platform where we kind of allocate all the latest technologies such as machine learning, artificial intelligence, or in-memory computing. And in particular, in that area, we have a super close collaboration with the larger hyperscalers, the known ones like Amazon, Google, but also in particular Microsoft. Talking about the eventual objectives that SAP has these days and that you're reading in the press, our aim is to use our applications, but also our technologies to allow enterprises to make more of the data they have, so they become quote unquote intelligent enterprises, and eventually interconnect them so that we're coming up with a network of intelligent enterprises covering the entire supply and value chain. What does SAP do at Nestlé? Similar to what Christian said earlier for Microsoft, we do have a long-lasting strategic partnership. It's more than 30 years in the meanwhile. And we have a saying, Nestlé is pretty much using almost all SAP software that we are offering. And what you see as well is that a big portion of the Nestlé revenue is managed in SAP systems. A definite focus topic, and this is not only Nestlé and SAP, but also Nestlé, SAP, and Microsoft, is that we are making use of the large-scale setup at Nestlé to drive joint innovation. And that's one of the topics we're talking about today, looking at the large systems, the large SAP systems Nestlé have, then those are in the meanwhile managed by SAP within Microsoft Azure. With that, Laura, back to you.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Markus. We can go to the next slide, perhaps. Okay, so the topic of the day, it is how Nestlé, Microsoft, and SAP worked together on one of the largest enterprise cloud migrations to date. And it's important to note enterprise cloud migrations because there's a lot of migrations to the cloud, but to the size that we just achieved in an enterprise context, we believe is a prime example in the industry that is a reference in many areas. And that's why we think it's so exciting to actually talk about it. But now this should be a little bit of fun. So maybe let's move on to the next. So Nestlé makes coffee. So we'd like to tell you our story with a little bit of fun, and then you may be grabbing a cup of coffee. We'll watch a nice video before, and then we'll get into the topic. And this video is not so much about IT, but you'll see that we can really relate our story to it, and it should be fun. So let's watch the video. We need 3 clicks now. One more. Hold on a second. We're not seeing the we're not listening don't get the audio. Do you want me to play? Okay, you reshare. Thank you.
What's that? Espresso. What's that? Espresso. Is that coffee? Yeah. I want in. Ready.
Is that coffee? Get ready to experience a cup above.
I want in. Espresso. What else?
Thank you. Okay. It doesn't matter how many times I watch the video, it actually makes me laugh. And this is quite a fun story. So how does it relate to our journey to the cloud? A little bit like Danny DeVito in 2019, we asked ourselves, we had this particular setup in Nestlé where we really wanted to consume new technology. We wanted to kind of leverage the benefits of the cloud, the benefits of the billions of dollars, Swiss francs, that the hyperscalers and software companies were investing in the cloud. And at the same time, we had a bit of a burning platform at home. In like DeVito, we had this old coffee machine, if you wish. We had old hardware. We had some old data centers, and we needed to really invest. And we needed to understand if investing in going to the cloud was the right move for us in terms of technology, and whether it was the right price point. So we did quite a bit of investigations, research, number crunching, and eventually we decided that yes, we wanted to transform ourselves. We wanted in, and we decided to really run a large journey to cloud program. And nowadays, running such a program is not something like a company like Nestlé can actually do alone. So we looked for partners. We looked for very strong partners, and in this case, we went primarily with SAP and Microsoft, and we thought there was an interest for all the three of us to kind of partner in this journey. So basically, we launched the partnership, we signed the contracts, and off we went. But before we tell you how we did it, I'd like to see, get from Christian and Markus a perspective of why companies like Microsoft and SAP were interested on running this kind of program with Nestlé. Markus, maybe you first.
I think from our point of view, this is what I mentioned on my introduction slide already. I mean, we have a strong interest in the enterprise cloud business, and I think the pure complexity and the volume of the SAP landscape at Nestlé, that really helped us to further develop and further extend. I wouldn't say the maturity, but our overall offering in that domain. So if you see what we had to achieve, this was not kind of something that SAP could achieve on its own. but there was the need for doing kind of joint developments, joint optimization. We have had to involve kind of technical experts down to engineering from all parties to eventually come up with a setup that is tuned and matches the specific requirements from the Nestlé SAP systems, eventually running in a virtual environment. And I think that nicely fits and underpins the importance of the two sentences I had on the other slide. I think joint innovation is one of the key topics, and that's only feasible if you have a very strong partnership.
Christian, what was Microsoft's interest on these?
Well, Microsoft was already partnering with Nestlé on the cloud, and we had a number of applications and data migrated to the cloud. But the project with SAP was something extremely special, first of all, because it is by far the largest business application in Nestlé, and it is holding a very significant part of Nestlé data. It doesn't make sense to have all of Nestlé on the cloud if SAP is not part of it, because that's where we're driving the value by bringing all data together. But it was a huge challenge for us to extent that we had to bring the very, very latest hardware. We had to really rethink some of our data centers just to allow for the scale of the project. And it required very strong collaboration and work with Markus's team, with SAP and with Nestlé to make sure this was very carefully planned. We wouldn't have any disruption to the Nestlé business. So it was a challenge, and it was a huge collaboration. And we really had, let's say, the roadmap and the objectives set by Nestlé at heart when planning for it.
Okay, so let's maybe see how we actually transformed our business. So if we go to the next slide, perhaps. Thank you. So we, like DeVito, we kind of decided to upgrade ourselves, to really transform. And like for him, it was not a simple transformation. It was a process that took 3 years in our case, so all of 2020, and we're about to finish at the end of this year by shutting down all the previous data centers that Nestlé had. The actual migrations of SAP systems were completed by June this year. So all in all, I would say 2.5 years of migrations, and we actually had a bit more than a year of preparation before we even signed the contract. So it is a long journey. It is a tough transformation. We're happy that it just finished, but let us tell you a little bit how, where the things, the key things we had to work on to make it a successful program. And in there we had challenges of all kinds. We had technology challenges. We had to do this in flight. And we'll talk about it in a second. And we need to plan it very carefully. So the first thing we did, and I think critical success factor number one, was to assemble a very diverse and skilled team. And I think we'll say multiple times today, probably, but the one team from Nestlé together with SAP, together Microsoft, made a big difference. And you need that kind of setup to be successful in a complex program. The team was also very diverse because it wasn't just technical experts from SAP. We also, or Microsoft, we had our own experts. We had project managers, we had program managers, we had people that had to deal with network transformations and then establishing the path to migrate, say, from our data centers to the cloud. And we had to live through what we call a hybrid landscape, with a part of our systems on-premise and part of them in the cloud. But let us give you some figures around the size of the migration. We had more than 500 systems that we had to migrate. I think Markus, you were looking at at the petabytes we had to move, and you have some fun comparisons there.
We looked into that earlier, Laura and I, and we thought about what is a kind of a unit that is easy to grasp. And we thought about what's the number of movies in HD quality that we have to transition as part of the overall program. We came to 100,000 movies roughly that we had to transform. And I think what Laura said, what's of utmost important was there was a very strong need, there was a very strong demand from the Nestlé business side to do this with high business continuity. So you cannot do this like having a running machine and stopping that here and there. You really need to do this in a flawless manner. And I think this fits nicely to what Laura said before. We have had a joint team, and the whole kind of migration, so the system transitioning activities, is something that we had to jointly test again and again. We had a large continuous improvement program, and we had a dedicated platform where the teams doing the actual work have been able to train over time and really get to the necessary level of experience and quality that we required to make this also for Nestlé Business at the end a pretty much seamless event.
Yeah, I think Christian, you compared yesterday with, maybe a Formula One race where the car can only stop a few seconds to change the tires.
Yeah, I think what really struck me in this entire project is the way we really worked as one team, because there is a certain degree of planning, or there's a high degree of planning we're doing for this kind of migration. But like in Formula One, you want to minimize the stoppages. So when a car is racing, you want to change the tires. It is a team spirit. It's having everyone coordinated, working on one team, being extremely efficient, but also being able to cater for on-plan, right? Because when we migrate SAP and have a project of this scale, there's always on-plan happening. So suddenly something breaks, network doesn't work as expected, some servers don't work as expected, capacities are exceeded. And it really struck me how the teams were coming together with thinking in the interest of the project and not in the interest of the individual companies, and solving problems in an extremely efficient and collaborative manner. Excellent. It's a great experience from Microsoft side. We very often refer to this Nestlé migration experience. Yeah.
Indeed, and I think it was really, our business runs 24/7 around the clock, and it couldn't really tolerate a big outage or disruption for us to migrate. So this image of Formula One to me is fabulous, because it really is. It looks like just 5 seconds is easy, but it's incredibly complicated for these guys to get to the 5-6 second stoppage, to allow the driver to continue the race with the slightest possible disruption. And that's something similar to what we achieved in this program. And I think for both SAP and Microsoft, we had a bit of a technology challenge, because I remember by the time we signed the contract in 2019, the virtual machines that were supposed to host our systems didn't really exist in the size that we needed. The performance of these virtual machines was a question mark, whether we would have the network bandwidth. So do you want to kind of reflect on these challenges and how the teams overcame them?
Yeah, I mean, this was actually a very kind of almost stressful time, right? Because we realized that the machines were not able to cope with the level of performance required for the size of the application we had with SAP. And we had this new machine developed, and that was actually in a pandemic also, where there was a shortage on IT components. And I remember in some points in the project where we finally got the machine delivered something like 24 hours before they were actually needed for the implementation. And these were moments where the entire company at Microsoft had to get involved. We had to put high pressure on some of our partners and collaborate very efficiently with some of the hardware manufacturers. And the entire company was really behind it. I think one of the latest high-performance server was delivered 24 hours before deadline or something like that. It was crazy times, and it really felt very much like a race. And I think there we were happy to be in this kind of partnership where Nestlé was able to adjust and show some flexibility. We could really plan on the best way and on alternative routes to get there with SAP. And it's really the strong flexibility and team spirits that made it happen.
Excellent. And Markus, on your side, do you want to reflect on how these technical challenges felt on the SAP side?
I mean, I can build upon what you and Christian said earlier. I think it was key that, yes, we haven't been in a situation where we could kind of just plug together off-the-shelf components. On the Microsoft side, as Christian summarized, in particular, the need for getting kind of latest, greatest hardware available. What we had to do on our side, jointly with the development teams, is we had an environment where we have been able to simulate or emulate the productive load that we would see on the systems eventually, in order to have an environment to really like a playground to really see what is the best setup for the entire stack, the best setup, how can we fine tune in order to not wake up the day after the migration completed with a big surprise, but really to be ready in time and to have everything prepared and optimized to the very end. So it is latest technology, latest hardware on the one hand, but also a big effort in testing and in kind of exploring the best setup and the best configuration possible.
Thank you. And that last point is very good, because we not only focused on ramping up, planning and executing the migration, but there was a lot of attention paid to the day after, right? So how do we ensure, as we hand over the management of the systems to SAP, that the procedures are ready, that when people have problems with systems, the right path to incidents exists, and that the readiness of every single component that needs to be used by the applications in the cloud is there. And there again, I'm very proud to report that, because we invested a lot on being like future-proof and ready in terms of processes and day-to-day management and governance. Once we transitioned to the cloud, we had reasonably smooth days given the size of the challenge. So that's about the time to upgrade. We can maybe move to the next slide. So basically we completed, and we were like Danny DeVito, very happy, very pleased with our achievements, but also our learnings. I think we reflected already a little bit on the learnings, how important is to have one team, how important, and maybe this is interesting for you out there that are looking at a future career. There are multiple roles one can have in IT. One can be a technical expert, one can be a program manager, one can be an expert in change management and training. And in any big IT transformation kind of program, there is space for all these different roles. So when you look at IT, it's just this multitude of skills and diversity in points of view and knowledge that really make up the success of a project. So to me, that's a key learning number one: partnering with strong companies out there like SAP and Microsoft that really committed to the success of the project was essential for us. And we are very grateful to this day how well that collaboration worked. And then, prepare before, tackle the challenges one after the other. I think what Christian said, my blood pressure during those days of hardware delivery, that we wouldn't know if we would be ready on time, when the blood pressure was super high, but also we could manage because we saw the commitment everywhere, and that was really, really reassuring, even though the situation was tense. So those are my key learnings. If you want to reflect maybe a bit more, Christian and Markus.
I can maybe start with this. I think a big driver was an absolute transparency. And I think this is something we did across all three partners. So whenever we faced any kind of problems, challenges, we always made sure to address and mention them early on. So that's maybe also a general recommendation when you join in a company. Don't try to hide anything. I think it always becomes easier if you share something transparently, because then you can also work on getting all the necessary experts aside that can work on getting it resolved. And what Laura said, I can just echo, right? We had critical phases in the preparation phase, and just thinking about the most kind of business critical systems, for some of them, it took us 1.5 or 2 years, right, in order to really get through the learning curves and to achieve the quality that we wanted to get towards. And that can only work if we have kind of a community across different partners that have a trustful relationship and that are always transparent if it comes to challenges or risks.
Yeah, I also wanted to come back to one of the questions on, the ratio between planning and execution. So one question was asked. I wouldn't see it as a big planning phase and then executing the plan and it happens. Actually, when the project is so massive with so many components to it, it is a very iterative process. So you start with a plan, you execute, you learn, and then based on the learning, the plan gets revised and we optimize for the next phase. So it's a constant phase of planning, coordinating, learning jointly between Nestlé, SAP, and Microsoft, and optimizing and getting things done. And it's also a question of people. So it's also about securing the right resources, getting the best experts on Microsoft side, on SAP side, making sure there's certain continuity and people talk together and act as one team. So the people aspect, I think, on this kind of project is extremely important. It relies on a whole group of people that have to mix with a group of people. And I was reflecting on something that one of the person from Microsoft said is when they attended the celebration when the project was done with SAP, they were saying, well, when they were coming to a celebration, you had a group of people celebrating together and talking together, and it was almost impossible to see who belonged to which company. So that's how close the teams became, I would say, after 3 years of project.
Indeed.
Now, from our point of view, it doesn't stop there. Obviously, bringing SAP to Azure is huge, and it means a very large set of Nestlé data is now in Azure, and it is now a phase where it is about bringing value and using those data and connecting those data and building in artificial intelligence, machine learning, automation, and delivering business value, more and more business value and learning with time.
Exactly. So that's the what's next, you would see people out there that anytime you finish a program like this, you have like 5 minutes to breathe and congratulate people, and then the next iteration is at the door, and that's exactly who we are. So as we were approaching the end, we started to think, okay, how do we, are we good? Yes. How do we then leverage the next phase here? And as Christian was saying, there's a lot of additional technology innovation out there for Nestlé business to grab and consume. And together with our partners, we're really looking forward to really leveraging those evolutions for Nestlé, for the Nestlé business. Okay, any closing comments there, Markus? Or shall we move to questions?
Maybe one sentence that I'm using oftentimes in our teams internally these days, and that's the word learning organization. And I think this is absolutely critical these days. I mean, we demonstrated that nicely in the program itself, but also now afterwards in the what we call sustain or run phase, right? In this phase where we actually operate, maintain, and use the systems to drive further innovation, as Christian said. Also there, we still almost strive for improvement, right? So, and this is why, for me, learning organization, the acceptance and the pure willingness to every time we're doing something, reflect afterwards across partners. How was it done? Could we have done it better? Even though we maybe achieved what we wanted to achieve, was there opportunity to do it better? Could we do it next time? So that we always strive for excellence. I think this is what matters. This is what we demonstrated in the program, but this is also what we need to take as a learning and further use in the sustain phase, but also in the projects to come jointly with Nestlé and Microsoft.
Perfect. I absolutely agree. Okay, I think that's our recap on the project. We didn't want to take it to many technical details. I hope this is interesting for everyone, and really our message of you can leverage great partners and great technology for the benefit of a big enterprise like Nestlé. Now let's get on to the next slide. Perhaps we have some questions out there that came through Slido. For example, what were the top 3 challenges during migrating to Microsoft Azure from a traditional data center hosting, and how were they resolved? Markus, do you want to take on that one, or?
I'm definitely happy to start, and you can add afterwards.
Top 3 challenges. Migrate.
One challenge that we definitely had was overall network setup, network bandwidth and capacity, because you don't need to think about start and end. You need to think about what's the time in between, where some of the systems are in Nestlé data centers, others already in Azure, while we are using the same network to transfer systems over the line. So that was a huge challenge to be able to calculate also the overall demand, to make sure there is no kind of performance degradation, end user impact during the whole phase. Secondly, I think the technical elements that we touched upon earlier, to really be able to have an environment in place, and that was a clear credo from the very kind of early pre-sales days. The environment must perform at least as good as what we had before in the Nestlé data centers. So that was something we always measured. So I give an example. We oftentimes took kind of performance benchmarks before we moved the system. We did early measurements right afterwards to really have proof points. What is the actual net effect of the transition? Are we as good as before? If we were worse, what could we improve? Hopefully seeing that we get better afterwards. Point number 3, that's maybe less a technical challenge, but I would want to get back to the whole kind of global pandemic situation. I think in the past, when we had projects of that size, we have been able to set a few primary locations, get all the experts in there, and resolve all the problems. That is something that was definitely not feasible in the last 2 or 3 years. So we had to find different ways of communicating, different ways of collaborating. There was a big learning for all of us. And what I often discuss with the team in internal sessions is, whenever we do have a team meeting, we typically start the first minutes with a non-business discussion. If you would meet a person somewhere kind of in the office, you would never straight go to business talk, but you would always have some social touch points to start with. And what we are trying, I think, not only in SAP, but also in the collaboration with Microsoft and Nestlé, is to live the same, right? To always have a good balance between opportunities to further improve the relationship, also having social touch points, and if it's just virtual, plus the pure focus on business, on content, and to get to kind of high quality results.
Thank you. I have one, I think for me, there was another challenge that I would put also on the top 3 or top 5. And it was to get we call it the landing zone ready in Microsoft Azure. So when you are in the SAP landscape world, you would think applications that need to be migrated. But it is clear that these applications need some data center services or cloud services. We used to call them data center, now cloud services, such as security services, authentication, load balancing, printing capabilities, job management capabilities, and things like that. And basically, if you are going to close down your data centers on premise, which is what Nestlé actually did, we had to think of moving all these services ahead of moving any SAP applications or have a plan for all of them. And of course, then all these things that you have a maybe second thought were on the critical path. So it was a challenge to get them all ready on time to start the SAP migration. So that was quite an interesting challenge as well from my side.
I would say a challenge from a Microsoft side as well is managing this kind of size of an environment for which we had, we have huge experience in cloud, but there haven't been that many projects in this kind of scale and this kind of size of application on managing into a cloud. And it comes with a huge responsibility because, as Laura said, you cannot afford to have any downtime. You cannot afford to have a stop in the availability of services. So we had to learn very fast and to scale the data centers and scale the entire hardware very fast and ensure reliability in a very, very short time frame. So that meant that we had to mobilize really the best engineers and the best people we even had in the company from all over the world, and this happening in a total hybrid setup. So we had engineers collaborating from the US with engineers located in Switzerland and the teams at SAP and also hardware providers. So it was a very, very complex environment with a huge level of coordination across multiple parties.
Indeed. I have another question maybe for you, Christian. It says migrating to the cloud saves a lot of energy. How does Microsoft Azure source the energy to run the infrastructure? Is it via sustainable energy sources? Very fair question nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Microsoft has been investing since a very, very long time in sustainable energy sources. We have a lot of solar energy and alternative energy sources. We also experimented with very innovative technologies. We were, for example, the first ones to have underwater data centers to enable cooling of the data centers by being in a very cold environment, or having data centers placed in simply very northern countries where the energy needed for cooling is much lower. So Microsoft is constantly investing into alternative sources of energies, into renewable sources of energies, and solar, photovoltaic sources is a very important one.
Excellent. There's a question here that says, what were the issues with Nestlé's existing data storage systems that resulted in the decision to migrate to the cloud? I don't know that there were issues with them, but these systems were old from an infrastructure perspective. The data centers were old. So Nestlé had to decide to invest on premise or to take the chance to go to the cloud. And it was a very delicate decision because these hardware cost millions, literally. So if we were to embark in renovating the hardware and the data centers, it would have meant for Nestlé that we would stay on premise for another, I would say, 7 years. These are the typical cycles of investment. And in 2019, waiting 7 years to leverage the investments of companies like Microsoft and SAP in cloud seemed like too long, because you see, Nestlé invests on coffee. Now we are the best coffee makers in the world. Nobody can match us. I can say that very proudly. I think we're always ahead, but it is because Nestlé invests constantly in agriculture for coffee, in roasting, in everything around this industry. And we're not in the IT business, so we don't have enough money to do the same kind of investments on IT than we do on coffee. But that's the business of companies like SAP and Microsoft. And that's what we wanted to leverage for Nestlé, the best in class technology, the best-in-class knowledge around IT for enterprise is what we wanted for Nestlé, so that it would allow us to run a lot of additional innovation, leverage automation, artificial intelligence, et cetera. And up until that point in time, we had invested a lot on-prem. We didn't think that we could cope with that innovation curve. So it was the right thing for us to go to the cloud. So nothing wrong with the systems we had before. It was just this looking forward and how fast can we get into using what the companies like SAP, Microsoft, and others are actually doing on the cloud. So I'm sorry, very long answer from my side. I don't know if you guys want to add there, or we go to another question.
I assume when you migrate from on-prem data center, it's probably also a simple a cost component to it, right? But long-term, not having this investment over time and leveraging the scale of big cloud providers generates some cost benefits.
It does. So, Markus, perhaps, there's a question here that says, what are the next steps in the relationship between Nestlé, Microsoft, and SAP once this data migration has concluded? We alluded to it. I don't know if you want to say the name, but...
No, exactly. I mean, I think this is nicely closing the loop. The whole new environment that we are now in, so the virtualized environment in Azure, that is also like a booster to go for further innovation, technical innovation I'm talking about. So think about how can we use the new technology like process automation, like artificial intelligence, to have kind of some of the key processes, not fully but partially automated, to go for higher quality, less human errors, etc. I think this is one big topic. From an SAP perspective, of course, to go to the next kind of big version of the software that we are with. This is one topic we are looking into jointly. But for me, it's really having now the power of the virtual environment to really see how can we leverage to the best extent to jointly drive innovation. Because we have now the flexibility we need, we have the platforms and technologies we need, and now it's with us to really make something out of it that has high business impact.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for that. Christian, maybe one for you. It says, where is it? You were at Nestlé before. Let me find the question. Sorry for this. For Christian, I saw in your LinkedIn that you previously worked at Nestlé. What would you say are similarities and differences?
That's a good question. Well, obviously, I think both Microsoft and Nestlé are companies that are striving to be efficient and to constantly innovate and look into the future on very different products, where Nestlé is innovating on providing the best possible food and nutrition proposals to consumers. We are constantly striving at being upfront of the next innovation. So this kind of innovation spirit, I think, is something that both companies have very much in common. What is maybe different is the speed at which things change in a technology industry, where we simply don't have products that last for decades. We know that products evolve and become obsolete after a few years, and if we're not ahead of time, we simply fall behind in the market, and we can't afford that. And But overall, I think the working environment and the way of collaborating is not that different. We are both are very collaborative organizations where people work in team, where it's not individual performance is not enough. It's about the ability of leveraging the capability of others and making things happen together. And in our case, this extends beyond the company, but also making things happening with big partners and with very large customers like Nestlé.
Perfect. Markus, one for you, perhaps. Do we need 5G speed and bandwidth for cloud automation? I think it meant to say cloud migration. 5G speed, I think we need a lot more than that.
We need a lot more. Yeah, I think what we had calculated back then for the biggest systems, we were at about more than 2 gigabytes per second in order to be able to transition the huge amount of data from one data center to the other. And if you just take, I don't know, sometimes we had to go from one coast to the other in certain countries. So it was not just kind of a door-to-door migration, but it was really kind of a long-distance migration that we had to undertake. And that's what I meant to say before. And one of the top challenges we had, that capacity on the network side was needed for the migration, but that overall network had not only to cope with the data migration, but for the regular traffic, system-to-system communication and end-user traffic on top. So therefore, we had to super carefully kind of calculate up front and plan the low techie details, I know, I'm sorry, all these details in order to be able to come up with a setup that is eventually able to cope with the total demand. Again, looping back with the idea back in our heads that we try to keep the impact on Nestlé business as low as possible.
Yeah, you know, I'm not a network expert, but these 5 gigabytes per second, it is so mind-blowing. And it's like more than 1,000 times more than you would typically get in a normal connection, right? It is. I cannot even picture. It's just, I know it's just humongous. It's like having a pipe super large for all this data to be streaming. And we actually consumed it all, which is even more scary.
Yeah, and it was migrating something that was changing constantly, right? So, which is part of the difficulty, because we are migrating something that was in production.
Yeah. So how, just another question, we still have a few minutes. How does Nestlé best deal with decommissioning legacy systems? For example, the ones on the on-premise data centers, including disposal if applicable. So maybe I take it, I give it a try. So basically, we decommissioned the on-premise system. Decommissioning is just take it out of service, the on-premise systems, a few weeks after we completed the migration to the cloud. So once we migrated, we ensured everything was working fine, a couple of weeks, and then we basically uninstalled the applications, powered off the servers, took them off the racks, and we sold them. There's a second-hand market for servers, and in these pandemic days with shortages of semiconductors, it turned out to be a bit better than we expected it to be. Normally, you would scrap almost these old servers, but there was a bit of a market. And obviously, we had to be careful with deleting any data on top of the servers. And there were a few where, depending on the migration methodology, we had to keep the systems for a bit of a longer time. This is when we didn't do a full lift and shift migration, but basically we created a brand new system in the cloud and started operating from there. So for these systems where we have, you know, we only kept the data on premise and we have legal requirements for data retention, we have what we call a sunset mechanism. Basically, that is downsizing the capacities of these systems, and we basically put them in a corner of a room with an isolated network, isolated access to it. So we basically don't operate them, but we keep them there. So if we have a government request to see some of the data, we can provide for it, but we try to keep it as small in footprint as possible. So these are the two things we do: either decommission and sell, or sunset for the data retention period that we have. Okay, it looks like we need to wrap up now. First of all, Christian and Markus, thank you very much. It's been a very insightful session for me. I think, I hope that it's been insightful for everyone out there. And then I really want to thank everyone for attending the session. And we hope you did enjoy it. And you feel, in a way, inspired by the sharing of our experts. For us, digital acceleration plays a huge role in information technology, and there's always endless opportunities to leverage what technology can do for a business. And we hope this exploration really sheds a bit of light in how to use and work with new technologies. So that would be the end of our session. Just so you stay tuned. After this session, we're going to have our digital warriors in an interactive fireside chat. So if you want to hear what they have to say about how it is to work, to grow, and to make an impact in IT at Nestlé, please join the next session. So you can join it straight from here. There's a link. If you want to go back to the agenda and choose a session from there, you can do it as well. And if you missed any of the sessions because of whatever reasons you had to go for a run or had something more important to do, all these sessions are recorded and will be available on our page. In LinkedIn, just look for them with the hashtag NestLevel2022. So with that, that's all from us. Thank you again a lot for joining. Thank you again, Christian and Markus. And that's it for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Have a good